Now, at the same time, though, speaking of people who have this job and who are in the liberal media, these people are freaking out about Elon's acquisition and specifically about the free speech aspect. As usual, we can count on the one, the only Brian Stelter for having the absolute worst take possible on this in immediate reaction. Let's take a listen.
Look, who knows? I think that's an example of a broader question for Twitter, which is if you get invited to something where there are no rules, where there is total freedom for everybody, do you actually want to go to that party? Or are you going to decide to stay home? And that's a question for Twitter users. Some Twitter users might love the idea there's going to be absolutely no moderation and no rules at all. Others might not want to be anywhere near that. Am I crazy, Matt?
No, you're right. And what happens to the advertising? I mean, if there's no moderation or little moderation, do the advertisers stay away? What does that do to the business prospects for Twitter itself?
I think that's very much an
That party sounds like a banger, Krystal. I don't know.
There's one thing. When I get invited to a party, the first thing I want to know is there are going to be rules in place, right? Because otherwise, I'm out.
Right.
I actually, I genuinely, at this point, have affection for Brian Stelter because he is trying so hard, Saagar. He is trying so hard. He spent time workshopping this whole party analogy thing in his head, and never once did it occur to him that actually people do want to go to parties without rules. And it's silly to start with because it's not like Twitter's going to have no rules, or that there are, no rules already bounding and guiding the limits of free speech. You cannot directly threaten somebody as one, example. So it's not like it's going to be completely wild and crazy and absolutely anything goes. But yeah, the faces around the table, I don't know if you paid attention, they were ranging from contempt, confusion, to just humoring this poor guy. Before the other dude actually makes a decent point about
I was gonna say,
the whole reason that the content moderation is what it is has been to satisfy the advertisers. So if you take that piece out of it and that's less important, not that it's gonna be completely unimportant, but if it's less important and you're actually just trying to figure out what is the right and consistent content moderation policy, you're much more likely to come up with something that is beneficial for everybody versus just trying to make it safe for a bunch of squeamish corporate advertisers.
100%. And you can also keep this with the rest. Also, I love how you put it that way. In Texas, we just say, bless your heart, Brian.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly the sentiment.
It's the sentiment that you're putting forward. Let's put these up there on the screen. Some hilarious ones from our friend Shu. She says, today on Twitter feels like the last evening in a Berlin nightclub at the twilight of Weimar, Germany.
Oh my God.
Another one, I am frightened by the impact on society and politics if Elon Musk acquires Twitter. He seems to believe on social media anything goes. For democracy to survive, we need more content moderation, not less. Another, if Elon Musk successfully purchases Twitter, it could result in World War III and the destruction of our planet. And finally, dear Parag Agarwal, if you're reading this right now, the world needs to know you are stronger, smarter, and more tenacious than Elon Musk. He thinks he can beat you. The free world needs to know he is wrong. Yours truly, a lifelong and long verified Twitter user. What a loser using your verified status. It's not that cool, bro.
Yeah.
Trust me. The Verge also came in with a hilarious take. Let's put this up there on the screen. They say, how to deactivate your Twitter account, which is just absolutely incredible. Obviously, they're one of those tech hall monitor type outlets.
Well, and there are plenty of liberals on Twitter who were like, I'm not going to be on Twitter.
I'm moving to Canada.
This is my last tweet. I'm quitting Twitter, et cetera.
Actually, Sean King actually did it, which, props to Sean King for finally leaving us all alone.
He had a big following too, so it's a real loss.
Yes.
But yeah, listen, there were so many bad takes all the way around. I don't know if you also saw this, but Richard Hanania, who is, we've had him on the show before. He's definitely, on the right in terms of his politics and definitely not terrified of Elon taking over. He tweeted out something sarcastically.
Oh, his the
trolling.
master's thing. Yeah, that was
being
hilarious, by the way.
Elon Musk doesn't even have a master's degree. Are we going to trust this man with our democracy? And there were literally thousands of people who thought he was being serious.
Oh, right.
And he continued to, in the thread, make it more and more ridiculous. and they still did not get the joke. So you had people who just couldn't see sarcasm where there was obvious sarcasm. You had clearly, the liberals that we're highlighting here were completely freaking out, who obviously were so much less concerned when Jeff Bezos bought one of the most significant and important news gathering organizations in the entire country, which he still owns. But that was fine. And in fact, not only was it fine, but if you, like Bernie Sanders do, point out that this could be a problem for democracy, you were roundly mocked, shamed, disparaged, et cetera, et cetera. How dare you attack our news outlets? So there was that reaction. And then I think there's for the segment of the right that has been rightly concerned about elite power and control, that is just completely celebratory about the idea of handing their fate over to a billionaire that they happen to have more affectionate feelings for, which again, it's certainly not an answer to our bigger problems. Will it potentially be marginally better? Maybe. We'll wait and see. But if you're pinning all your hopes on let's have a different, better billionaire, then I don't think you're gonna end up ultimately in a good place.
Yeah, I think you're right. And to try and add some substance to this, it's a really interesting poll that Teddy Schleifer actually tweeted out over Puck News. He does great work, by the way. Let's put this up there on the screen, is that there's a poll here highlighted by Data for Progress and at Recode. This was in February of 2021. Elon Musk is actually very popular across the board. So his favorability and unfavorability for Democrats is 52-22, meaning he has high favorability and a pretty unknown unfavorability. Amongst Republicans, it's actually favorability is lower. It's 48 and 25. Amongst men, it's 66-21. Women is 37-27. Don't really have an opinion, it seems. Amongst young people is very popular, 54-22, and at 45 plus at 48-25. So what he says here, and I think is really true, is the real schism is really not public opinion on Musk between Democrats and Republicans. It's between men and women.
Yeah, that's right. Interesting.
Really, when you point out the favorability, I just think it bears repeating that normal people think of Elon in the context of Tesla, in the context of SpaceX. They may have seen some of his antics, but they respect him as probably the greatest entrepreneur in the US over the last 20 years. And they don't really think about him beyond that.
Well, that's the thing. Is normal people probably just don't think that hard about him.
They're like,
or have
he's fine.
super evolved view on all of the things that he's done or said or et cetera. It is funny. Yeah, it was interesting to me that there was basically no partisan divide whatsoever.
Yep.
It was very, very closely matched, Democrat, Independent, and Republican. The big schism was dudes really love them, so Elon Musk, women not so sure. And he does, just as his public persona, I know there's something about him that's magical to men, especially young men under the age of, let's say, 50 or 40 or something like that. That is definitely where his key demo and his core superpowers lie.
Well, he's like a teenager in a lot of ways. That's kind of how he behaves.
Yeah.
He's very childlike. If you read like I said, you read his biography, he literally talks about, his dream was to be a wizard whenever he was a child. He had a very tough childhood, to be fair. Apparently his dad was kind of a psycho. And
oh, really?
Didn't treat him very well. Him and his brother, and put a lot of
pressure on
you should go and read the book. Yeah, he was not treated well. Apparently, was very emotionally abusive as a father. But really, what it put into him is he was a huge nerd. That's really the only thing that comes out of it. He was bullied terribly. Whenever he was in high school, he was obsessed with computer games and coding, and that's why he became the computer scientist that he eventually became. But what you learn about him is that he's quite an impulsive person. He's a lot like a child. He said his dream, and now that he's a billionaire, is to be as much like a wizard as possible. Whenever he was interviewed most recently. So I think that's why he appeals to look, at the end of the day, the man did manifest several of his actual visions, which is a lot more than many people can say in life. So I think that you point to an interesting phenomenon there about what the actual divide is and probably where it actually cuts ideologically, but it just points to the fact that these liberal, media folks, the establishment types, are just so freaked out. Because I think at the end of the day, they know that their ability to pressure Twitter in order to censor exactly as they want is over. And that is where the real power that they've had over the last several years has come from.
Well, they have this whole ideology that the way to combat ideas that they consider to be bad or dangerous ideas is just to shut them out, to censor them, push them out of polite society. And that, I think there's a genuine fear and belief that like that's the way that we can keep this whole thing together. I just happen to think that's not only wrong, but extremely counterproductive and leads you down the path of ultimately destroying the democracy that you think you're trying to protect. And so their ideology depends on the ability to, to have their ideology reinforced and have people who don't agree with that pushed out of the public square. So I think that's why there's such a freak out here versus, what is Jeff Bezos, who is definitely not on the left in any meaningful sense, but is going to be anti-Trump, is going to be, with them more or less when it comes to social issues. They didn't perceive that as a threat, even though, anyone who's being consistent here should just see that billionaires controlling our news gathering, our public squares is a big problem in society, whether you happen to be comfortable with that billionaire or not. I saw another poll similar to this Data for Progress poll that actually was an internal poll of Twitter employees. Because a lot of the narrative around Twitter employees is like, they're freaking out, and oh my God, they hate Elon, and they can't, they are so worried about he's gonna destroy Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't doubt that because, like you said, there are likely to be layoffs, and they're not sure what this means for their stock holdings, and is the headquarters even gonna stay in San Francisco, and are they gonna be able to continue to work from home? I don't doubt that there are a lot of concerns and angst around what it means literally for them and their livelihoods in their day-to-day. But in terms of sentiment around Elon, this particular poll internally, it was completely divided. You had, an equal amount that liked him, an equal amount that didn't like him, and a group in the middle that was like, not sure, we'll see.
My guess would be that the technologists and the engineers are probably the ones who are most excited about him because they're more familiar with what he did at Tesla and at SpaceX. And my guess would be that that lady who went on Joe Rogan's podcast, Vijaya Gadde, the head of trusted safety, is probably freaking out because I hope that she gets fired. That's exactly those are the people who are the chief censors. So I would split the company into the technologists are probably excited about Elon, and then the HR industrial, diversity industrial complex within the company is the ones who are freaking out the most. But look, maybe I'm wrong.
Who knows? Because you could also imagine a scenario where the people who are involved in content moderation have hated the fact that they've been constrained by corporate advertisers and their concerns. So who knows what the breakdown is, but I did find that interesting that the internal sentiments around him were actually very evenly divided, at least according to this poll.
Yeah, I think a lesson of the show is always things are a lot more complicated than people think. Okay.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.